Welcome everyone to the live stream. Boy, do we have a lot of news to cover today. Things have been getting crazy, so we've got a lot to cover. I'll just wait for everyone to come and join the live stream. You know the drill. Just type 1 in the chat if you can hear me. 25 is going to be crazy. How you going, Cheap Charlie? Riding the Bitcoin runaway train. Well, Bitcoin's not doing too good today. Hopefully we get a recovery, but over the past couple of days, Bitcoin has been getting smashed. Awesome. Morning, Craig, Alex, Michael, Cleveland, Jay. Okay, Tony. Hi from NZ. G'day, Hampton. Hey, we're just waiting for everyone to roll in so I don't need to repeat myself 10 times. Can take a while for everyone to get the notification that we're going live. Yep, things are getting pretty crazy, Cleveland. Hey, Marty. Yes, Joseph, my time is 11 p.m. So it's a late Friday night at the office. Everyone's out partying, but we got to go over what's going on around the world. Hey, from Poland. Love your love what they're doing over at Poland, putting their country first. Hello, nobody. Bill. Oh, got a couple of people watching from Poland. Yep. Queensland. Tony. Holland. Yeah, so we're gonna react to a few videos. We've got a lot of videos. We're going to go over Elon Musk, what he's now doing with Congress, how much power he's gaining, how much influence he's gaining at the moment. We'll go over some of those drone footage that Joe Rogan has put out. Also, more specifically, we'll go over the orbs. Yet 6 a.m. All the early risers in the US. Good morning, and good evening to all my late viewers in Australia. And I guess it's pretty early in Europe as well. Hello from Missouri, Dennis. Hey, Paul. Ohio. Utah, Nemo. G'day from Canada, Eric. Yeah, we're going to go over the story with Elon Musk. We're going to go over some of those orbs in New Jersey, because I did a video on the drones, but a lot of people are talking about these orbs. The drones, they're observing the orbs, or the orbs, are they just another psyop from the US government? We'll also go over the markets today. The markets will open in a couple of hours. We obviously got what's going on with Bitcoin. Bitcoin's crashing right now. As we can see, it's down about 5%. It's down to 92,000 from the high of around 108,000. So that's taking a beating because of the pivot with the Fed. Because the Fed pretty much has no idea what's going to happen next year. They're clueless, and that's why the markets are selling off, because what does the market not like? The market doesn't like uncertainty. G'day, Paul. I think a lot of my viewers do understand the 2030 agenda, and it's all has been going according to plan so far. Yes, a lot of people get overextended with Bitcoin, and there's liquidations. We'll also go over what's going on in the bond market, because we've had the Fed lowering interest rates, but the bond market doesn't believe that the Fed is going to be able to keep interest rates low for much longer. The reason why gold's going down, because everything's selling off, because bonds have been going up, and obviously because there's a lot of uncertainty now with next year. They thought there's going to be massive rate cuts. Doge and XP getting absolutely hammered. Yes, unfortunately. Thanks for the super chat, Cheap Charlie. Yeah, 2030 agenda was part of the Great Reset. And part of it was owning nothing and be happy. That rings a bell. Okay, let's see how many we've got in the live stream now. We've got a couple hundred. I think we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get into the show. It's going to be a big one. We'll be covering a lot. I don't know if my voice will hold up. It tends to be after about half an hour the voice goes from yapping too much. Yes, rate cuts should make gold go higher, but the reason gold is selling off now is because the market anticipated there's going to be 4 rate cuts next year, but now they're only pricing in 2. And some people think maybe even the Fed might not be able to do 2 because inflation is picking up again. Yeah, well, hopefully we can turn things around, Tom. I have been getting, after seeing, you know, people wake up about the 2030 agenda and a lot of things are going better lately, so it's giving me more hope because a lot of people have woken up over the past few years. A lot of the crazy policies that, you know, the politicians were putting out are being reversed now, so it's giving me more hope. All right, let's get into today's show. First things first, some things that's not giving me much hope right now is the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, you've probably heard about that for a long time. Might be getting a bit burnt out with it. But what's crazy is Britain is getting more and more involved, and they may drag the whole of Europe with it and escalate things when we're trying to de-escalate things. So look at this. British Defence Minister says UK forces could be sent to Ukraine for training. Now, they always start with, you know, well, we're just going to go do this, we're just going to advise them on this, we're just going to do that. But they're getting closer and closer to troops on the ground. Russia's done reports that there is mercenaries fighting that's being paid by the US, UK, and Europe. But this is not good if we do get troops on the ground, because we don't want World War III. We want, you know, them to hopefully get a deal when Trump comes in. But I'm not getting delusional that Trump will come in and end the war in one day. But I do hope he can make a peace deal or a ceasefire. So British Defence Minister John Healey has suggested the UK could send troops to Ukraine for a training mission during a visit to Ukraine. He told The Times, we need to make it easier for Ukrainians to access, and we too work with Ukrainians to help them motivate and mobilize more recruits, he said. I don't know why he needs to. You know, I don't know what the UK public think about this, if they need to, if they need to get involved. When he asked what that could involve sending troops, he said, we will look wherever we can to respond to what Ukraine wants. What about what your people want? This is what people have been getting sick with, these WEF politicians pushing their globalist agenda, not what their actual citizens want. They're the ones fighting, that's true. Russia has repeatedly warned against Western countries sending troops to Ukraine for training purposes, saying any NATO soldier would be legitimate targets of Russian military. That's another thing we don't want. We don't want our soldiers being sent there and dying for something that they don't need to. He says, en route to Kiev, he said, one of the most critical periods of war, adding the year may be ending, but the war is not. This is time to step up further in Ukraine on every front. So leaks have revealed that British soldiers have been on the ground in Ukraine throughout the war, but they have been unofficial. So yes, we all know that there have been US troops, British troops, other troops from other countries, mercenaries, but they're trying to keep it hush-hush. Earlier this year, a German military leak revealed that British soldiers are in Ukraine helping Firestorm Shadow missiles, which recently began striking targets inside the Russian mainland, marking a major escalation of the proxy war. So that's right, this is a proxy war. We all saw in 2016 how Hillary Clinton was trying to, you know, hype up a conflict between Russia, and now it is a full-blown conflict, and US, UK, Europe, even Australia is helping fund this war as well. Let's go ahead to this clip here.
With ally nations that have rallied behind the leadership the UK has offered, will continue to do that throughout 2025.
And a simple question, could that involve British troops, boots on the ground, inside Ukraine, training Ukrainians?
Well, the detail of our joint Ukrainian plan will have to remain, let's say,
He doesn't really want to say exactly what he's going to do because he knows there's going to be a big backlash.
Available to President Putin. But the important thing is that we are stepping up both the UK leadership in coordinating other nations. We're stepping up the UK support for Ukraine. We're determined that we will put Ukraine in a stronger position in the weeks ahead and throughout 2025. And we're also a country that will step up the pressure that we put on Putin.
Yeah, okay. Also says here, the Discord leaks revealed that as of March 2023, 97 NATO special operations soldiers were inside Ukraine, including 50 British soldiers in April 2022. The Times reported that British Special Air Forces soldiers were in Ukraine, training Ukrainians on anti-tech weapons. So that's the story on the situation with Ukraine. Europe and UK is getting more and more involved in getting closer and closer to having boots on the ground, a direct conflict with Russia, which is something, you know, we really do not want. Now let's get into our next story. Just welcome to everyone that's just joined the live stream. We're going to get into the New Jersey drone, but more on the orb side of things. So Joe Rogan posted a video on Instagram, and look at this. These are the orbs people are talking about. I have no idea what they are. You know, with AI getting so crazy these days, it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake. But it is very interesting. Now, also, something that I was thinking about today was, remember last year the Pentagon all of a sudden started to declassify a lot of documents on UFOs and everything like that. I thought last year, I think I know the reason why they're doing this is because they're going to maybe try to do a false flag event. And I didn't really think of it. I kind of forgot about it. But now I've been watching this story, I remembered it. Someone said Project Bluebeam. I have heard about that. I have to look more into it. What do you guys think about this Project Bluebeam? Now also, people have said that these drones are getting energy from these orbs, where other people are saying, no, there's drones that have like charging stations in the sky. Maybe it's just more people are looking into the sky now because it's the big news, and there's always been these things here. Maybe people saying they're just planes. But look at this. This is very interesting, these orbs that are disappearing. Some people are saying that, you know, we want to get a bit more down the crazy rabbit hole, or the conspiracy rabbit hole, put your tinfoil hats on. People are saying that there's multi-dimensional universes, and this new Google quantum computing chip has found other multiverses, and these higher intelligent species are now keeping an eye on us, you know, with war that's escalating, with nuclear weapons, that maybe they know there's going to be some kind of mass extinction event coming, and they're trying to warn us. Who knows? You know, that's just some of the theories out there. But it is very, very interesting. And again, there's still a lot more questions and answers. Played the clip yesterday of the White House saying that some of these are science experiments, which is a bit worrying. What kind of science experiments are they doing? So we'll go ahead and play another clip on, again, why I think this is more likely. I think it's more about Congress wanting to do more surveillance. And there was a bill that was blocked by Rand Paul yesterday, but we'll have to see how this continues to go, about how they're trying to use this situation to pass more surveillance laws.
Upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there an objection?
Madam President,
Senator from Kentucky.
reserving the right to object. No one disputes that drones flying in airspace could be a danger, that drones flying over the Super Bowl could be a danger, that drones flying over our military bases could be a danger. That's why it's illegal. It's currently illegal, and the federal government has the capacity to investigate and stop drones that are in airspace, over our military bases, following our ships. We have that capacity. But what is disputed, and what the Biden administration is currently telling us, is they don't see a problem. So if there is a problem, let the Biden administration be forthcoming, let us know the extent of the problem, let us know who's flying the drones, and let us know what's going on. Instead, this bill says, well, we don't know, the Biden administration doesn't know, but why don't we give the power to the local officials to go after drones?
That's exactly right. They keep saying, oh, we don't know what this is, but then they do know, saying, oh, it's just, hobbyist drones, it's just commercial flights, but we got really no clue. But give us all these new laws that we can use to surveillance you.
But I rise today to object to this unanimous consent request because at the time, public trust in government is in historic lows. This body must not rush to grant sweeping surveillance powers without proper consideration and debate.
Roll call's talking about the Willows chip. If you haven't heard about it, just look it up.
By the committees of jurisdiction, which is what I pledged to do beginning in January when we will be in charge of the committees. Yet what is going on is exactly what this legislation seeks to do now, is to expand federal authority to intercept communications and disrupt drone activity, powers that raise serious concerns for Americans' privacy, civil liberties, and Fourth Amendment protections against unwarranted search and seizure. We are being told this legislation is urgent, that it is needed to address an imminent drone threat, yet the government itself admits no such threat exists. So either there is a threat or there isn't a threat, but the Biden administration keeps saying, well, it's all normal stuff and it's just planes.
Yeah, that's right. Is it a threat or not?
So it is or it isn't. Why don't we try to get to the truth of the matter of what actually exists and what the threat is before we propose legislation? Federal agencies, including the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, have stated clearly that there is no current national security risk, no public safety concern, and no unlawful drone activity requiring intervention. So there either is a problem or there isn't a problem. If there is a problem, let's discuss how to do it while protecting the communications of innocent Americans whose their communications could be caught up in this.
Remember those 15-minute cities they were thinking of creating? Imagine if this is just all part of, some people earlier in the live stream were talking about the Agenda 2030. What if this is all just ways to track people's movement more? You have little drones following you around, and they say, oh, you're out of your economic zone, time to go back in. Who knows?
This legislation. Until the assessment, the federal assessment changes. The assessment that it isn't a problem changes to that it is a problem, and these are the malefactors. These are the people that are orchestrating this. Let's get that from the Biden administration. Tell us what the problem is. Tell us the extent of the problem. Instead, the Biden administration is saying there's not a problem. So, Madam President, this pattern is all too familiar. History has shown us time and time again how fear and manufactured urgency are used as pretext to expand government power at the expense of freedom. After 9/11, Congress passed the Patriot Act in the name of security. Americans were promised that these surveillance powers were necessary. They would only be directed towards foreigners. They would only be directed towards terrorists until we discovered that these powers were being used on Americans.
That's exactly right. If you think, this new legislation will only be used for monitoring foreign drones, we all know that they'll use it to surveil American citizens as well.
Americans were promised that these powers were necessary and temporary. Instead, they were abused.
That's another thing. Whenever the government says, don't worry, it's just temporary, it's never temporary, it's permanent.
Misused, and weaponized. Innocent Americans had their privacy violated, their data collected, and their rights trampled. The lesson here is clear. When Congress legislates in haste, without careful scrutiny, without debate, and without accountability, it is the American people who suffer the consequences. Today, we are facing a similar moment. The bill before us would grant law enforcement significant authority to intercept private electronic communications without consent. For example, The bill would allow the government to conduct dragnet surveillance of the phones innocent Americans traveling through U.S. airports as long as the government claims they are doing it to neutralize a drone. So in order to look at the information that might be coming to a drone, it may be that you capture all the information of everybody surrounding an airport or everybody who lives near an airport. Once you have all that data, what are the assurances that the government isn't looking at your data?
Oh, they're definitely going to be looking at your data. Come on, people. We all know the drill.
In addition to the data that may be related to flying the drone. This is not just about security. It's about unchecked government overreach. It's about capitalizing on fear and media-driven hysteria to jam through sweeping legislation that could violate the civil liberties of American people. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on the executive power, not as a rubber stamp for it. The federal government already has the power to deal with drones. The federal government already has the power to stop any drones that are in airspace around airports. The federal government already has the power to protect its air bases. So if there is a significant problem here, the Biden administration needs to come forward and let us know, who are these drones? Who's operating these drones? What is the federal government doing to protect either airports or bases from this?
That's right. They've had to literally stop certain flights or shut down certain airports temporarily because of this drone situation. And we still don't have a good answer on what's really going on. Instead,
we are told by the Biden administration there is no threat to our national security. So let's first insist on truth and transparency from the Biden administration before offering up legislation that is feel-good, pat somebody on the back and say, oh, we've done something about drones. We are strong on drones. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to serve as a check on executive power, not as a rubber stamp. We owe it to the American people to demand compelling justification, meaningful safeguards, and full transparency before granting any new surveillance authorities. We are a nation of laws, not fear.
Well, we'll have a video later, George, or in a minute I'll play it on, yes, some people think it might be Chinese drones.
Not panic and not manufactured urgency. We do not trade away our freedoms, our privacy, and our constitutional protections for vague promises of security. I will object to this bill today, but I am open to talking with the authors of this bill about how we could have enhanced ability to interrupt drone activity, but done.
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty likely it's not, but there could also be multiple, you know. We're just not 100% sure yet. This is still a very rapidly developing story. Some people think it is, some people think it isn't, some people think it's Iran. I'll go ahead and play this clip here.
Welcome back. Now to China. At least 17 U.S. military bases near Chinese-owned farmland reportedly seeing a surge in drone activity and sightings in recent weeks. The sightings happening near bases in Hawaii and installations in Utah, California, Maine, and Florida. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCall has been warning about the drones in focus these last couple of weeks. He says they're from China.
So
my judgment,
so again, is playing all theories here.
based on my experience, is that those that are over our military sites are adversarial and most likely are coming from the People's Republic of China. Communist China is very good at this stuff. And we know they bought land around military bases. This would be very consistent with their policy over the last couple of years.
Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville was with me this week. He weighed in on this yesterday. Watch this. Are we buying drones still from DJI, a Chinese drone maker?
Oh, we're buying drones from China. There's no doubt about that. I talked to
yes, sir,
a drone maker the other day, and basically I said, why are we buying drones from China? They have better technology, Maria, than what we have that handles a lot of the technology parts, like that works with different type of materials, different type of plastics. They make them cheaper, but they make them better. Our technology is way, way behind, and I guess that's the reason we're buying them from them. But again, that's something else that needs to be discussed with armed services, both the House and the Senate.
Joining me now is the Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow. He is author of Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Gordon Chang back with us. Gordon, I find this...
thought this was an interesting theory. Obviously, as well, very interesting about how much farmland China is buying up. So China has hundreds and thousands of acres, same in Australia, of farmland. And how much does Australia own in China? That's right, zero. So it's crazy that our politicians are letting China come in and buy up all this critical infrastructure and something that's so important for us and completely sort our countries out. And we've got nothing there. We don't own anything. Even the citizens can't own the land in China. They just lease it from the CCP.
Stunning that we are still buying drones from China, and here we are trying to guess what the drones in the sky are that we're all talking about for the last couple of weeks. My guess is, and I've been saying this, that it is communist China. Your reaction?
It certainly is communist China for many of these drones.
That's right, Speed Killer.
Maybe even a majority of them. You know, the increased tempo of these drone flights against our military bases is occurring at the same time as there's increased frequency of incursions and attempted incursions of these bases by Chinese and other nationals. Really, what is occurring here is that they are preparing to attack the United States from American soil.
This is a big claim. He's claiming that China is preparing for a direct attack on U.S. soil. I definitely hope not. But we can't become complacent.
I don't know why we need an engraved invitation from Beijing. It's clear what's going to happen. We are going to get hit, and we're not taking the necessary precautions to protect these bases and to protect the American people.
Well, I mean, there's also, a weakened situation to admit. For the longest time, General Jack Keane has been telling us on this program repeatedly for years that we are outgunned, we are outmanned when you look at our Navy versus the Chinese Navy. The Pentagon released its 2024 China Military Power Report yesterday. It found that Beijing is increasing its military pressure on Taiwan. It's ramping up its aggression in the South China Sea. It's deepening its ties with Russia, and its crackdown on military corruption may have disrupted progress toward its 2027 modernization goal. China also growing its nuclear arsenal, adding at least 100 nuclear warheads to its stockpile over the past year, with 600 plus already in the arsenal. That number could grow to over 1,000 by 2030, Gordon. And yet there's no response ever from the Biden-Harris administration.
I think I know there's no response from Biden because 10% for the big guy, am I right?
To Beijing's behavior. We allowed the spy balloon to traverse the country for a week before shooting it down. Why aren't they shooting down these drones in the air if they suspect they're from China?
There's no good answer. You have base commanders, first of all, don't have the authority, and they don't have the equipment to shoot down these drones. And the Chinese are noticing this, which means they see a big vulnerability. And with those nuclear warheads.
Also something, too, when we're talking about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, if the US, UK, Europe keeps on sending all their military supplies to Ukraine, then that could leave them very, very vulnerable to an attack.
Maria, China is building up its arsenal not to deter. It already has enough warheads to deter. It's building up its arsenal so that it can coerce us and others into not doing.
Yeah, I think that's probably most likely that they are American drones, but I'm just trying to give other alternatives or other theories here.
Things like defending Taiwan. They saw the way Biden reacted to Vladimir Putin's nuclear threats before the invasion of Ukraine. They saw that they worked, and the Chinese are going to do the same thing when they go after the Philippines, Japan, Taiwan, whomever.
Well, I want to look at what's happening on the ground. A Chinese man was arrested in 2023 for allegedly running a secret Chinese police station in New York City. He pled guilty yesterday to acting as an illegal foreign agent, Gordon. He's now facing 5 years in prison. He and his partner allegedly...
This is another crazy thing. The CCP spy police stations that are operational all across America, Australia, UK as well.
He opened this police station back in 2022 to track and intimidate Chinese dissidents living in the United States. Both were caught deleting communications with an official from the Chinese Ministry of Public Security after learning that they were, in fact, under investigation. Gordon, you've been talking about this for so many years, these police stations. You first broke the news on this program years ago that Beijing had set up these police stations in America. Again, no response from Biden for years on police station. Why would we need Beijing police stations in New York City?
No, we don't. And we don't need the 7 to 9 other police stations in the United States that the New York Post and the Daily Caller have written about and reported. It's fine that they closed the New York one. I'm great that they did that, but they should be closing the other installations as well. It is just no justification for allowing the Chinese to violate our sovereignty and in many cases commit crimes against us. We're allowing consular officials and Ministry of State Security agents to commit those crimes and violate our security on our own soil.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Yep, great point. Lee Carter, jump in here.
Gordon, I am so intrigued by this whole thing.
All right, I think that's enough Fox News. Let's get into our next story. So that's the drone situation. Obviously, a lot of theories right now. We're going to keep watching this story, see where it goes, but I do have a bad feeling on where it's going to end up. Now, let's go into what's happening in the bond market and a bit of reason why the markets have been selling off lately. Because the Federal Reserve has been lowering interest rate, but the 10-year Treasury, we'll see what it's going at the moment. We can see breaking news here. The Dow Futures is down 270 points. The bond market has been going up, so we can see the 10-year Treasury is at 4.5%. So let's get into this report here. So from Brazil to South Korea and emerging markets, central banks are forming a line of defense as raising dollar pushes their currency to multi-year lows. And this is what we're going to go over, is the currency markets as well. So in Bangkok is watching the peso drop closely and a stepped up intervention in the currency market. We can see here the central bank has spent $14 billion in the past week to support the real, while the Bank of Indonesia vowed to guard the rupiah boldly to build market confidence. We've also seen in Australia, the Australian dollar is plummeting. It's becoming the Pacific peso. It's nearly down to 60 cents. So authorities in developing economies are on the defense as the greenback strength wreaks havoc across global markets, with South Korea won falling to its lowest in 15 years. I think it's also probably due to the political turmoil that's going on right now. When, remember, it wasn't, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, that the South Korean Prime Minister declared martial law, which was absolutely crazy. I think nobody was expecting that. India's rupee and the real crash to all-time lows, a rapid decline in currency risks, worsening the impact of important inflation for emerging markets, and may also increase the cost of servicing debt on foreign liabilities. So that's right. If you have to pay back in US dollars and your currency continues to crash, well, you're going to need more of your currency to pay back the debt, and that can create a foreign debt crisis. So it's hard to go against a strong US dollar trend. A currency strategist, there's currency strategists of Singapore, intervention in such an environment can only show the pace of currency depreciation. Despite that, central banks may still have to use a mix of verbal and actual intervention tools. So that's right. They can say, look, we're going to do anything it takes to defend our currency, to try to stop the speculators. They can go ahead and intervene directly into the markets. But we all know that all fiat currencies that have been created throughout history have failed. There hasn't been one fiat currency that has stood the test of time. Every single global backed currency has failed. So it'll just be a matter of time before we start seeing more and more currencies fail. The US dollar is just the strongest out of bad money. So we'll keep reading here. We can see here, I'll open a new tab, maybe a bit easier to see. So EMFX has seen a sharp drop in the final quarter. So that's right. We're seeing foreign markets currencies tanking. So the MSCI Emerging Markets Currency Index has fallen 3.3% at the end of September to head for its biggest quarterly drop in 2 years, led by the real Hungarian forint and the Chilean peso. And the moves come after the Federal Reserve forecast fewer interest rate cuts next year and signaled that inflation concerns are back on the radar. So that's right. That's what I warned you guys about. I said the Federal Reserve may be cutting too early and too aggressively and have a risk of reigniting inflation. And if we get a tariff war come in, that can make goods more expensive. And if they don't keep on bringing in cheap labor, that could make labor costs go up as well. So with the dollar expected to remain strong, policymakers in developing markets are taking action. South Korea said Friday it will ease the cap on banks' foreign exchange forward positions by 50% to boost inflows and address demand and supply imbalances in the local currency market. So China's central bank continues to support the yuan with its daily reference rate by setting it significantly stronger than the market's forecast. So what do you guys think about this? But not all the losses in developing market currencies have been due to the dollar's strength. The real has also come under pressure on concerns about Brazil's deficit after President Luiz Lula da Silva watered down a fiscal plan by adding a series of tax relief measures for the poor. Now, the declines in emerging markets have fueled a tide of bearish bets, with some hedge funds waging that more losses will accrue when President-elect Donald Trump proposes tariff policies kick in. And there's been a few advisors just going over, commentating on this. And it's not just emerging markets that are feeling the heat. Japan ramped up its warnings against currency speculation Friday after the yen slid to a 5-month low, with France minister cautioning that authorities will take appropriate action if there are excessive moves in the foreign exchange market. Yep, so that's right. You know, this money is not real money. It's just created. The only real money that stood the test of time is gold and silver. But the pushback against a stronger dollar comes at a cost, with monetary authorities forced to dip into their foreign exchange reserve to defend their currencies. The bullish dollar climb has been supported by the Fed's tilt to be less dovish, but the thinner liquidity in December can also create pronounced exaggeration moves, and I think that's what we saw with the stock market the other day. So that's what's going on with foreign currencies against the dollar. They're weakening. Now we'll go into this next story with Elon Musk, his growing influence in Washington. We can see he heavily promoted to kill the bill that a lot of people weren't happy with, the 40% pay rise for people in Congress. There's a lot of other things in there. Obviously, I don't have time to go over all of them, but we're going to talk about he's now got a huge influence with the Republican Party. And him, Vivek, and Trump have put a lot of pressure on Congress, and they now have a lot of power. Especially he owns Twitter. He has a lot of swing. Carl's saying silver is the most thermally and electrically conductive element on the planet. That's right. Now, he put this out, and he also posted this video here, which we'll go ahead and play.
There's no way to make up for it other than reducing the federal spending. And as I mentioned earlier, like a very important point that I think is important for people to understand is that all federal spending is taxation. Because what they don't receive, what the federal government doesn't receive in direct revenue, they make up for in inflation. They just print
That's right.
money. So all federal spending is taxation. Very important principle. Almost nobody, very few people seem to, even like, you know.
That's right. You should think, you know, it's not free money. You're paying for it with taxes, and the more they spend, the higher your taxes are going to be. And also, a way they service the debt is by increasing inflation, so the cost of things go up, your wages go up, and their revenue goes up, so they can keep on servicing the debt. Because right now they can't afford to repay the $36 trillion, but they're not going to repay it. They're just trying to service it, and they're going to keep inflation higher, so they can keep on rolling over the debt.
So somebody's like spend their life in economics. I'll mention to them, hey, all federal spending is taxation. They're like, first they'll argue with me, and they're like, then they will agree. It is. Because it is either direct tax revenue or it is inflation.
Now, obviously, some things are important, like healthcare, schools, etc., but there is a lot of waste in government spending.
Federal spending is taxation. So we must reduce federal spending, or we will go bankrupt as a country.
It's pretty right. Mic drop there.
So, all right.
You can't just keep spending forever and ever and ever, and the deficits go up and up. We saw Janet Yellen. You know, she pretty much just said, "Sorry, I increased the debt, $16 trillion." And I don't know about you, but I barely even saw Janet Yellen the past 4 years. Was she just in a nursing home for the past 4 years. I barely even saw her. She goes, yeah, look, sorry, but now, the next administration, they're got to deal with it, not me. And so, obviously, he posted, the elected representatives have heard you, and now the terrible bill is dead. The voice of the people has triumphed. But let's get into this this story here of his growing power.
That anyone who votes yes should lose their office in 2 years, and lawmakers are scrambling.
The big story in the country right now.
This is the Rubin Report, great channel. I'll skip over his commentary. Let's go into the story here.
To pull this interim spending bill off the floor and maybe just go with a clean bill, unclear what that means for disaster assistance. Here's what happened. A post on X by Elon Musk sent shockwaves through the Capitol. House Republicans were trying to see if they have enough votes to pass the spending bill in the next hour or two. Musk posted that anyone who votes yes should lose their office in 2 years, and lawmakers are scrambling.
The tweets from Musk, has that complicated this?
Well, I mean, I think that there's always a lot of interest in what's happening up here, and
this is more than interest. They're telling people if they vote yes, they should be voted out.
The social media world is a part of our politics, and I think members have to expect that. There are going to be a lot of hard votes in the next couple of years.
Member of the House Republican leadership told Fox that Musk is not helping. The lawmaker added that Musk has bigger fish to fry than picking a fight with House Republicans. One source said the bill is now bleeding support from the GOP.
Yeah, well, the bill's now dead, but it's going to be very interesting to see Elon Musk's power and how he does affect it. If they really do drain the swamp, if they really do increase government efficiency, if they really can get it done, because the US government is huge. One man can't do it on his own. But now he does have a few people around him. So it's going to be very, very interesting after January 20th what exactly they can get done. Now, also, a bit of an interesting story, something I haven't really covered before, is return to work. And we're going to go over this this documentary, or the mini documentary, should I say. It's only 10 minutes. Of how employees are coffee badging to avoid full days at the office. So are any of yous doing this when you're returning to work? And just wait till you... It's funny how the people lecturing us are doing the opposite of what they recommend. So let's go into this story.
Rolls into the office at 9 a.m., swiping his badge with perfect enthusiasm. He hits a few meetings, grabs coffee with colleagues, and keeps the daily buzz going. But here's the twist. Come noon, he sneaks out, heading home to wrap up his work in comfort. By around 5, he's clocked out. Mission accomplished. Mr. A has redefined the 9 to 5 in his own terms. And interestingly, this...
Wow, is this happening at your workplace? Have you heard any of your friends doing this?
Trend also has a name.
A new trend emerging in the back to office push, and that is coffee badging.
Coffee badging is two worlds colliding. It's employers wanting to get their workers back into the office, and employees desire to really have more flexibility on the job. And so that's coming together in this trend of coffee badging.
Coffee badging is happening because workers are using this as a soft revolt against the return to office mandates that companies have put out. And they just badge in, have a coffee, check in with their colleagues, do some work, and then leave their office early.
It is a sign.
My work here is done. See you later. But it's funny, you'll watch that lady, she was joining via Zoom. This guy's joining via Zoom. Are any of them actually... that are lecturing people saying you need to come back to the office? Are any of them actually in the office?
Silent protest of saying, I just want to be home.
Thanks, Carl.
Coffee badging was a term that Owl Labs,
this guy's on Zoom as well,
coined as part of its 2023 State of Hybrid Work report. And what we found is that employees weren't necessarily returning to the office in a traditional 8 to 5 manner 5 days a week, but they were coffee badging. Some were going in just to show face, grab a cup of coffee, say...
So that's interesting. It's funny how they find all these buzzwords for pretty much just people trying to avoid the commute, or people that aren't, putting 110% effort for their corporate elites. 34% people who prefer to work in the office for the full workday. Yes, if you got a lot of distractions at home, or if you got a lot of colleagues that you get along with, if you're lucky, you're one of those few lucky people that get along with your colleagues, you might prefer to go to the office. People don't coffee badge but are interested in doing so.
They hi to some of their colleagues, maybe their boss, so that they could check the box for their company's return to office mandate. Whereas others were going into the office for different periods of time, maybe for reasons that the office offered them luxuries that the home environment didn't, which is access to technology, which was meeting with colleagues or being in in-person meetings.
A lot of the workplace trends that we're seeing right now are very much reflective of what's happening in the overall job market.
The overall U.S. economy is performing well, but the job market is cooling. A closer look at the monthly job creation over the past 2 years.
And remember, a couple of days ago, I did a video. I'll move myself here so you can see this chart. A lot of these jobs that were created in April and June are going to be revised to pretty much nothing, because a lot of the jobs reports that were put out massively overestimate how many jobs were actually created.
Reveals the broader trend, with the labor market adding just 227,000 jobs in November. Some experts note that workplace trends often mirror the job market. During the pandemic, when workers' demand was high, quiet quitting became the dominant workplace theme. But now, as the job market is tighter, particularly for white-collar jobs, coffee badging is trending.
Workplace trends reflect what's happened in the job.
Another guy joining in from Zoom from home. So all these people lecturing you, you come to the office. So far, every person has joined in via Zoom from the comfort of their own home.
Market largely because you can tell who has the power. During COVID, the employees had the power. Employers were scared to death of losing employees, and it was a tight job market. And it was very difficult to get qualified employees in the door. These days, the employer has the power because even though the job market fundamentally is still good, it's not nearly as strong as it used to be. So employees can't job hop the way that they did 2 or 3 years ago. Now, from the perspective of the employer, it's, look,
another reason maybe why they can't find workers, a lot of people joke about, they look at a job application and they'll say, for example, administrative role, entry level, 10 years experience required, which is obviously insane.
We gave you your time, now it's our time. You're going to come back to the office, and if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere.
Dynamics that we saw in the labor force a couple of years ago were
okay. I think this guy's in the office. He's grinding.
Very unusual. The issue is that we had much fewer workers, and a lot of power had really shifted towards employees and away from employers in the workforce relationship. That's one of the reasons. Yes,
I'm working from home, which is awesome. And I think other people, if they perform, they should be able to work from home. Commuting 2 hours a day, sometimes each way, there's peak hour traffic, crushes your soul. You also don't get as much sleep, because if you have to wake up 2 hours earlier to go to work, you're not going to be as productive if you're sleep deprived.
We saw quiet quitting because there was just a lot of demand for workers, and people weren't that worried about losing their jobs in that kind of an environment. Whereas now we have an environment that's much more balanced.
Productivity has long been a contentious issue for supporters and critics of remote work, with mixed results in studies measuring its impact. For instance, October 2024 research from the Bureau of Labor Statistics found that productivity increased with the rise of remote work across 61 private sector industries from...
Yeah, it makes sense. If you're able to do something before you start work, or you're not losing sleep because you're not having to get up so early, you're not drained or getting frustrated with traffic. Understand there will be some people that get distracted at home, but again, it should be just purely based on your performance. Nice to be able to get into the office in 10 seconds from the bedroom. That's right. I got to commute all the way from the front of the house to the back of the house. Got to make my way down the hallway. Sometimes a bit of traffic in the hallway. Got to navigate the hallway traffic. Go to the kitchen. Get my morning beverage. Open the door and then bang.
2019 to 2021. However, a major July 2023 study by Stanford's Institute for Economic Policy Research reported that fully remote work is linked to about 10% lower productivity than fully in-person work.
So studies are not clear.
Yeah, I think maybe going to the office once a week for meetings and socializing with your colleagues, checking with your manager. I don't see any issues with that. But having to go 5 times a week, if you can do your job from home, don't see why not.
On whether remote work makes you more or less productive, there is mixed evidence there. But there are perceptions that coming together can increase productivity.
The reason there's no clear answer on this one is because it's incredibly hard to measure how remote work is impacting productivity. So it really depends on the job. It depends on the skill and the task that you're trying to complete, what industry you're in, what kind of worker you are. That makes it incredibly hard to get an exact answer to, is remote work good or bad for productivity?
When I look at the relationship between home work versus in the office work as it relates to productivity.
Yeah, that's right, Brenton. It's good for hard workers, not good for those that are slacking.
I have a different perspective than a lot of people because I'm not going to debate, the empirical numbers. I'm going to simply say one thing. Productivity is ultimately in the eyes of the beholder. Who has the power? In the case of the company, if the company is paying your salary, the company is giving you a paycheck, and the company says in order to justify your productivity, you need to be in the office, you have to be in the office.
The fact is that bosses like to have people on the premises.
See, she's working from home too. Again, I work from home, but I'm not telling people to come work for me and work in an office.
I've spent most of my career as an editor-in-chief, and I liked to have people in the office. And there's something to be said. I totally am very empathetic to the idea of culture and mentorship and creativity and all of those things. But that said, there is a reason why hybrid remote work remains so prevalent, and the reason is that it works.
Okay, now there's a big crackdown on what they're calling the new trendy slang coffee badges.
News reports of companies mandating in-person work have been dominating headlines recently, with studies also highlighting crackdowns on the coffee badging trend. Owl Labs data shows 44% of hybrid employees still coffee badge. That's down 24% from 2023. Meanwhile, 70% of coffee badgers have been caught, with 16% now forced to be in office for the full day. Interestingly, some companies...
Well, they are generally slacking and their performance is falling. Don't see big issue there. But also what I do see is a lot more coming, will be a lot more employee surveillance. In Australia, there's this grocery company called Woolworths, and in their warehouse they wanted to put these pieces on them, these electronic equipment, so they can track their movement in the warehouse, to track their performance, how quick are they walking the warehouse, how quick are they packing the orders. Obviously they do this with Amazon right now, but that can lead to a lot of injuries, because if people are tired and they're forced to work harder and they're not meeting their quota, then they could do things at a pace that's not safe.
Companies are also using badge data or swipe data as a tool to promote, demote, or even lay off employees.
So I wrote a book called The Algorithm about how AI is used in the workforce, to hire people, but also to monitor employees. And one of the folks that I talked to was an analyst at Gartner. One of the companies he was working with, what they did is they looked at we want to find the people that we haven't really promoted before. How can we do this? So this
a lot of firefighters and pilots wish they could work from home. Obviously,
company came up with this idea to look at batch data. So the people who batched in early and batched out late, who had very long hours at the desk, were supposed to be more promotable than others. The unfortunate thing about that company was also when the pandemic hit and they started to have to do layoffs, they wanted to look at this kind of badging in, badging out data to understand who are the people that leave early, that have the...
Again, in next 5 years, it's going to be very, very dystopian and draconian how employees are going to surveil their workers. It's getting crazy.
Fewest hours in the seats, and they were going to look at those to lay off.
General, you said you had someone with a stopwatch standing beside you to time your work. That's crazy.
The push by some companies against flexible work is apparent in job postings with fewer remote roles. LinkedIn data shows flexible work stabilizing at 1 in 5 listings since November 2023, down from a peak of over 1 in 4 between October 2022 and March of 2023. Indeed's chart also shows a decline in remote and hybrid job listings since their 2020.
Also, a lot of these jobs, I wouldn't recommend staying long term, because if your job can be done from home and you're in a country where there's very expensive wages, they can just simply offshore it. And a lot of these administrative roles are going to be replaced by AI eventually.
22 peak. As the world reopened post-pandemic, corporate America shifted its stance on remote work. Companies like Amazon now mandate employees to return to the office 5 days a week or risk losing their jobs.
Company's cloud chief, Matt Garman, saying during an all-hands meeting that staffers who don't agree with the policy, well, they can leave. According to the transcript that was viewed by CNBC, he said the following, in quotes, if there are people who just don't work well in that environment and don't want to, that is okay. There are other companies around.
You know, there are a lot of employers, I'm saying small to mid-sized employers, who are waiting on a juggernaut like Amazon to officially go ahead and push forward with a 5-day work policy.
Yeah, because they do it. They're like, look, Amazon's doing it. Everyone's doing it. You got nowhere else to go now. So now we're just going to force it on you because you got no choice.
Because their bank account is basically the size of a small country's economy. And this is just an Amazon attitude, is if you don't like it, go someplace else. Other employers, and I'm hearing this behind closed doors, employers are really happy that Amazon is pushing this, because if Amazon's doing it, now we can follow suit.
Yeah.
I don't think that the 5-day work week is something that you're going to see generally. It's the fact that Amazon has opted to go that direction doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is going to move in lockstep with what they did.
One of the reasons employers can get more workers back into the office because there just isn't as much mobility as there was a few years ago. You don't see as many workers moving. And in fact, 2 in 5 workers tell us that they feel...
Yeah, well, it's going to get a lot worse because the unemployment rate is starting to tick up. And if the US falls into a recession next year, obviously you're not going to want to be leaving your job anytime soon. And this is why you should all try your best to try to start a side hustle on the side or find other sources of income, investments. So if something happens to your job, you're not all of a sudden stuck with nothing in your bank account.
Stuck in their job.
Amazon, who's now mandating all of their employees come back 5 days a week. And employees have been up in arms about that. They don't want that. They want to keep their flexibility. It remains to be seen if this is going to have a huge ripple effect, if other employers are going to mandate the same thing.
CNBC reached out to Amazon regarding its 5-day office work policy. The company stated that the policy was needed to ensure that its team stays connected to invent, collaborate, and deliver the best results for its customers and
I think what's that meme with Jeff Bezos? It's all just about the customer, you know, with his crazy smile.
business. The push against remote work isn't limited to companies. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, co-leaders of the so-called Department of Government Efficiency, are proposing a 5-day in-office work week for federal employees, raising doubts about the future of flexible work and the coffee badging trend.
Yeah, when I look at the future of flexible work, here's what I see. Depending on the industry, flexible work might be the thing to be. You know, if you happen to work in a technological industry, you can work remotely. It doesn't necessarily require that you to come in the office versus if you're in a human resources function, if you're a warehouse function, if you're in something director of operations, that's going to force you to continue to come into work because you need to be hands-on. So what we're essentially going to see in the future is going to look a lot like the past.
It's very clear when you look at the data on LinkedIn that employees prefer flexible work. So they're going to be looking for those hybrid options, those remote options, wherever they can get them. And
yeah, makes sense.
They're going to be looking to make work for them as they did during the pandemic.
I think we'll go on to our next story now. So that's the new trend that's going on now, coffee badging, where people are just going in, saying hello, trying to tick off their day that, yes, I was in the office this week. Now, there was a story here. Oh, there's some breaking news here. Biden forgives $4.28 billion in student debt. Okay. Congratulations if you're one of those people that got their debt, student loan cancelled. But unfortunately, a lot of other people had to pay and are still paying their student loans. So Putin is also admitting that the economy is not doing too great, which I think we all know. It's quite obvious. He's in a war right now, and defending his country is a bit more important than worrying about inflation for him at the moment. So Putin admits Russian inflation is on an alarming signal and the economy is overheating. So let's dive a bit deeper in this report. So It's overheating. Of course, inflation is such an alarming signal, he said in an annual direct line Q&A session with Russian citizens. He added that the government and Russian central bank were tasked with delivering a soft landing of the economy, which insisted was performing well overall and could achieve about 4% growth this year. Now, obviously, it's hard to trust a bit of the data that's coming out right now, but we all know that the Russian economy is not doing good. But we'll have to see how their economic strategies go with their new partners like China, Iran, and North Korea. Let's see if there's some more information here. So Russian Consumer Price Index hit 8.9% in November. I think we can double it from whatever the official numbers are, up from 8.5% in October. So this is accelerating, driven by rising food prices with the cost of milk and dairy products soaring, probably because they're not getting as much goods from Ukraine anymore, and other sanctions on them. A weaker ruble following the US sanctions in November had also fueled inflation, driving up the cost of imports into Russia. Meanwhile, massive increase in military spending has caused labor supply and production shortages elsewhere, which has pushed up prices and prompted workers to demand higher wages. That's right. You know, if a lot of the men are fighting in the war, there's going to be less labor there in the workforce, and so the workforce can demand higher wages. He said, of course, inflation's going higher. He said, just yesterday when I was preparing for today's event, I spoke with the chairperson of the central bank, who told me that it was already somewhere around 9.3%, but wages are growing by 9% in real terms, and I want to emphasize this, in real terms minus inflation, and disposable income of the population is also growing. So again, hard to trust the statements there. G'day, Jake. Welcome to the live stream. Russia's central bank is widely expected to hike its benchmark interest rates by 200 basis points to 23%. So could you imagine what would happen to the US economy if, you know, they got directly involved in a global conflict and inflation got out of control because they had to spend massively on military spending, and interest rates went to 23%. It would be game over. This was the highest in a decade, up from 20% seen during the invasion of Ukraine in 2022. So Putin blamed international sanction for price rises, which is pretty obvious, but also appeared to criticize the central bank, saying experts had suggested that other tools could have been used to tame inflation beyond interest rates. So of course, external restrictions, sanctions, and so on have also had an impact to a certain extent. They are also not the key importance, but they are still reflected in one way or another in the rise in prices because they make logistics more expensive, he said. He said we should have these timely decisions. This is an unpleasant and bad thing. In fact, the rise in prices, but I hope that in general, by maintaining macroeconomic indicators, we will cope with this, he said. He added that the government and Russian central bank were tasked with delivering a soft landing, like we said earlier, about 4% growth. The International Monetary Fund predicts Russia will notch 3.6% growth this year before a deceleration to 1.6% in 2025. And so why is this, what is going to cause this sharp downturn? He says as private consumption and investment slow amid reduced tightness in the labour market and slower wages. That's right, it's going to have more and more impact over time when more and more men unfortunately go into the war and die in the war. On Thursday, Putin predicted that Russian economic growth could be 2 to 2.5% next year. So Russian economy is weakening, along with a lot of other countries, as we went over earlier, with a lot of currencies depreciating at the moment. Now, also a very crazy story that I just wanted to quickly comment on was what's going on with CNN in Syria. They actually got caught releasing a notorious Assad regime torture, which was absolutely crazy. And this has all just been found out that it was a hoax. Like, this guy's meant to be in solitary confinement for the past 3 months, but he looks completely fine, like he just got in there yesterday. And why I'm playing this And why I'm covering this is because the US is getting more and more involved with Israel, and the conflict in the Middle East is escalating. And I think, before, obviously, the Biden administration was pushing for a conflict with Iran, or using Israel as a proxy for a conflict with Iran. And we obviously don't want this to happen. And hopefully Trump can de-escalate the things that are happening in the Middle East. But unfortunately, right now, things are escalating.
I'm a civilian, he says. I'm a civilian. He tells the fighter he's from the city of Homs and has been in the cell for 3 months. Okay, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
So yeah, I think this reporter has been caught faking news reports in Ukraine as well.
He clutches my arm tightly with both hands. Okay. Does anyone have any water? Water. My. Okay, it's water. It's water.
He doesn't look too malnourished to me. CNN has been left embarrassed after a reporter released a notorious member of the Al-Assad regime. Yeah, actual fake news. I'll go ahead and move myself here so you guys can see. So last week, CNN journalist Clarissa Ward entered a secret facility in Syria where they found a prisoner lying on the floor. Would help the prisoner out of the facility, called the moment one of the most extraordinary moments I have witnessed. I think she witnessed it a few times because they had to probably do a few takes. I'll see if I can skip to the other footage here. The independent unbiased fact checkers found that the prisoner was none other than Salama Muhammad Salam. So also there was footage of him when he went outside. He looked directly into the sun. And I don't know about you, but I can barely directly look into the sun first thing in the morning. But he was meant to be, in solitary confinement for 3 months, and he went directly outside and looked directly into the sun. So more fake news at CNN, and I just thought a funny story, which just shows the clown world that we're in right now. So San Francisco hires obese body positivity activists to work for health department. I think this is why you saw Trump win the election this year, just because how backwards and just how crazy the left got. They were literally trying to make good bad and bad good. Up is down, left is right. You can't make this stuff up. Body positivity activists to work for the health department. That's crazy. But we also got US prompts NVIDIA probe into how chips ended up in China. So maybe there have been some people that have been compromised by the CC party again, which is all too common. So the US Department of Commerce has recently asked NVIDIA to look into how the company's products ended up in China over the past year. The information reported on Thursday, citing a person close to the department. The chip giant has asked big distributors such as Microcomputers and Dell Technologies to conduct spot checks for their customers in Southeast Asia, the report said. And NVIDIA's artificial intelligence chips are embedded in server products made by Supermicro and Dell. So the information reported that 5 different people involved in smuggling NVIDIA chips said they had managed so far to evade detection during recent inspections by Supermicro. We insisted our customers and partners strictly adhere to all export control restrictions. Any unauthorized deviation from previously owned products, including any grey market resales, would be a burden on our business, not a benefit, he said, a spokesperson said. Some of the customers duplicated serial numbers of the servers containing NVIDIA chips they purchased from Supermicro and attached them to other servers they had access to. In some cases, smugglers even altered the serial numbers in the operating system for servers. And Dell said the company requires its distributors and retailers to follow all applicable regulations and export controls. So the company added that it takes appropriate action up to and including termination of its relationship if a partner is not adhering to these obligations. And Supermicro... Whoop, it just crashed there. I'll go ahead and reload that. Maybe I said something that the algorithm didn't like. And in some cases, smugglers even altered the serial numbers, went over that. Supermicro said an investigation takes action against any unauthorized exports or re-exports. And Supermicro follows all US export control requirements on sale and exports of GPU systems to region and parties that require licenses under the Export Administration Regulations. So we're seeing more and more critical infrastructure getting into the hands of China, which in the CCP, which is not good. So the Joe Biden administration has doubled down on the chips crackdown in China, and the US broadened a ban on the sale of high-end AI chips to the country last year. Still, several Chinese universities and research institutions procured these NVIDIA chips via resellers, Reuters, should I say. Earlier this month, the US curbed semiconductor exports to 140 companies, including chip equipment makers. So that's something else we have to keep an eye on. China continuing to take more and more critical infrastructure. But I want to go over this next report on why the Fed rate cuts aren't making mortgage rates cheaper. We've saw what's been going on lately in the bond market, and things are not looking good for the housing market.
A mortgage in the United States is expensive.
I think that we're seeing some strain in the system, but until mortgage rates come down and supply increases, we're not going to see prices come down.
The average rate on the 30-year fixed mortgage today is hovering around 7%. In 2021, rates were at all-time lows. Consider how that affects the financing for the typical American home. With 2021's rates, interest payments would cost around $157,000. If it were financed in 2024, the cost jumps by...
That's absolutely crazy. This shows how unaffordable the housing market is becoming, and this is happening all across the world, all developed countries. And could it be part of the Great Reset plan of you'll own nothing and be happy? So in 2021, home price of $420,000, down payment $84,000, loan term 30 years. For those of you that got a lucky interest rate and use a lucky in the US that you can fix a rate for 30 years. Here in Australia, and I think Canada as well, can only fix rate for up to 5 years. I'm not sure about Canada. Maybe they can do it a bit longer. But now interest rates are almost 7%. The monthly payment has gone from $1,300 to $2,200, and the total interest you're paying now has tripled to $460,000.
By a lot.
Right now, we have high prices and high mortgage rates, so it's a double whammy. Housing feels especially unaffordable.
Mortgage rates in the U.S. are determined by many factors, including the decisions made at the Federal Reserve.
We think that our policy was appropriately restrictive.
The place where the average citizen felt the collateral damage the most painfully, I think, has been in the housing market.
The Fed is now cutting...
Yeah, that's right, Robert. Only 5 years, so a lot of people got rates fixed at around 1.9%, I think around the lowest point, and now they're about 7%. So a lot of Aussies are really struggling right now.
Interest rates, but that's not making it easier to buy a home.
I think the best case scenario is we're going to continue to see mortgage rates hover around 6.5% to 7%.
So why are mortgages so expensive, even as the Fed tries to ease economic conditions?
Also, what happened, which caused a lot of the banking crisis in 2023, was a lot of these bonds or these mortgage-backed securities plunged in value when they were made, when they had interest rates of 3%, and then interest rates went up to 6%. Investors didn't want to buy the 3% mortgage-backed securities; they wanted the higher interest payments, and a lot of the other mortgage-backed securities plunged in value.
The Federal Reserve's recent policies have had a dramatic effect on mortgage rates.
You had these record low mortgage rates during the pandemic that fueled all this buying, which pushed home prices up.
The Fed then raised interest rates to stop inflation.
We raise interest rates in order to cool the economy off, in order to reduce inflationary pressures. It's not something that people experience as pleasant.
But also the government keeps on spending. It's very hard to stop inflation.
Fed implemented what some people have called a rate shock. It has resulted in a market that really is just not functioning properly at the moment.
This sudden jump in financing costs created a lock-in effect in housing.
The lock-in effect itself came from the Fed raising interest rates relatively rapidly in 2022. So if you look at the...
I'll go ahead and move myself here so you can see the chart. Interest rates on existing mortgages versus new mortgages. So if you're someone that has a mortgage of sub 3% right now, you're definitely not going to want to sell, reducing supply in the housing market.
The interest rates that mortgage holders have out there in the market, over half of borrowers actually have an interest rate below 3.75% on their home. Folks are holding on tight there. That means less homes coming onto the market as those folks hold on, which means less housing out there to buy.
This leaves home buyers with fewer options on the market and a high cost to finance any home that they find.
That's right. You're now, just a couple of years later, paying literally triple the interest on a 30-year mortgage than someone that bought a few years ago. And so people are simply not wanting to sell, and this is making the housing crisis worse.
As a result, 26% of the homes sold in the United States were paid in full with cash.
Must be nice if you could buy a house in cash. Of course, a lot of these big, huge real estate funds like Blackstone that are coming in and buying up a lot of these homes with cash.
2024, an all-time high. The remaining 74% of home buyers relied on mortgage financing. Those new mortgage holders are on average paying over 35% of their income on housing. If you think
that's crazy. Anything over 30%, you're in severe housing stress.
Think about a 30-year mortgage. You're going to your bank and you're entering into a financial obligation to make 360 payments and then the mortgage is paid off. It doesn't usually take 30 years for a mortgage to get paid off. In fact, the average effective mortgage maturity is only about 8 years.
That's how long folks typically hold them before they're either selling and moving to a new home.
Well, a lot of those people that probably would have held their home for 7-8 years, they're not going to be selling or moving now.
Or refinancing to reduce their interest.
And that's right, Neil. A lot of the new houses aren't built very well as well.
Interest rates.
Many Americans are waiting for interest rates to fall. The Federal Reserve started a rate-cutting cycle late in 2024. The Fed's main tool, the federal funds rate, determines how money flows between banks. Lower interest rates can make loans cheaper, but so far, this has only had a limited effect on mortgage rates.
The interest rates that they can set are much less effective than most people assume. Since when they announced the first rate cut, the Treasury rates have gone up, the mortgage interest rates have gone up.
That's right, and now the 10 years at 4.5%, even after their latest cut that they just did a couple of days ago.
They're trying to persuade people to do things in the market, but the market has its own logic, its own intentions.
It's not likely that home prices come down, typically. It's a much better hope to find affordability from rates coming down, and that can certainly happen, but it is going to have to come as a result of weaker economic data, lower inflation, or significantly less government borrowing.
That's exactly right.
Mortgage rates are greatly influenced by the U.S. economy. Bankers keep track of that by observing the yield, or return on investment, from loaning the government money for 10 years.
Your Treasury investments are thought of as relatively risk-free. You're lending money to the federal government, you know they're good to pay you back.
Some investors think the Treasury yield...
It will come a day, might not happen next year, might not happen in 5 years, but there will be a day where the government will run out of money. They keep on the rate that they're going right now.
Could rise from here.
If folks start to feel like our spending is getting a little bit out of whack, and they start to question if the U.S. citizen can actually, meet this tax bill further on down the road, they may want higher compensation.
New mortgage rates change over time, roughly in line with the 10-year Treasury yield. But there's an additional fee baked into mortgage rates to account for the risk of taking on the investment.
That's right.
The amount of the additional fee is called the spread.
Most of that spread is accounted for via risk. When you look at mortgages, there are...
Let's look at the 10-year Treasury yield right now. So yeah, it's actually gone up a bit, 4.54%. Again, it's gone up since the Federal Reserve did another interest rate cut.
A couple of kinds of risk that are added there for that spread. One of them is credit risk. If I lend money to an existing mortgage holder to refinance their loan, or a potential home buyer to buy a new home, are they going to be able to pay me back over time?
That additional fee baked into new...
I'll move myself here so you guys can see the charts.
Mortgage rates on the market has increased since the Fed started to tighten the economy. As a result, people who take on new mortgages are paying more than they otherwise would in normal economic conditions.
But it's not...
Because we all know the bank needs money after losing all that money on the bonds when interest rates shot up in 22 and 23. So they're trying to get some of that money back now.
Not as if a mortgage lender is looking at a 10-year Treasury yield and simply deciding what mortgage rates are going to be based on that. In fact, there are an entirely different set of bonds called mortgage-backed securities. The demand for mortgage-backed securities can wax and wane, and it's the price of those mortgage-backed securities that directly dictates what a mortgage lender can charge.
Today's mortgage rates are also influenced by the Fed's response to past emergencies.
Global financial crisis was in large part driven by...
Yeah, that's right, quantitative tightening. They did quantitative easing during COVID where they're buying bonds, they're buying mortgage-backed securities, but now they're doing quantitative tightening. They're getting bonds and mortgage-backed securities off their balance sheet that make interest rates go up as well.
A significant housing correction. And so in order to try to stabilize the housing market, not only did the Fed commit itself to buy U.S. Treasury debt, they also committed to buy agency mortgage-backed securities.
And that had a distinct downward pressure effect on rates.
That's right, Jake, just like in 2008.
In this process, the Fed buys huge amounts of debt to alter demand in the bond.
It's literally a Ponzi scheme. The government issues debt. The Federal Reserve has no reserves. They have no money. They create money out of thin air and buys that debt. And that is why we see inflation and asset inflation.
Market.
It shifts the supply-demand equation out there, effectively reduces the interest rate on mortgages that's being offered out there.
Mortgage rates fell through the decade as the strategy played out, which made financing a home cheaper. The economy eventually recovered. The Fed returned to this technique in the pandemic.
They were extra aggressive in 2021 with buying mortgage-backed securities, so the QE, and that was ill-advised in hindsight.
The Fed is now reducing the amount of mortgages that it holds.
That's right. They're now doing quantitative tightening, selling their balance sheet. And this is not their total balance sheet. This is just the mortgage-backed securities. The total balance sheet is around 7 to 8 trillion.
Experts call this process quantitative tightening.
Quantitative.
If they print their way out of the debt, then they create inflation, like what we saw during COVID. It's not a win-win situation, or it's a lose-lose situation.
If tightening is the exact opposite. They now have a portfolio on their books. They don't want that anymore, and they begin to slowly let that run off.
This is an experiment that's never been done before. I think that's one of the reasons the mortgage rates are still going in the wrong direction from the Federal Reserve standpoint. And that's a problem. That's a political problem as well as an economic problem.
Bankers believe the Fed could complete its current cycle of quantitative tightening.
That's what other governments have tried in the past, like Venezuela, and we saw what happened to their currencies and their economies.
In 2025.
When you look at the Fed's interaction in the mortgage market, I think, in a short synopsis, I think they would prefer not to be there. They don't want to disrupt the market too quickly, but they do want to gradually exit that market.
The Fed's
all right, so let's get into the outlook.
Best estimate suggests that mortgage rates could trend above 5.5% through 2025. Other forecasts are higher.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I think it could be in the high rate scenario because we just got news that the Federal Reserve may only do 2 interest rate cuts next year or may do none at all.
Odds if you see mortgage rate maybe settle down in the low 7% range, say 7 to 7.5%. So unfortunately for those homeowners who are looking for a bit of a reprieve on the mortgage rate side, that may not come to fruition.
The decision to buy or keep renting is heavily influenced by prevailing mortgage rates. Renters are currently paying $1,000 a month less compared to owners with a mortgage.
That's right, same in Australia. Renting right now may make sense for some people until interest rates come down or until landlords jack up their rents to catch up to these high rates.
That said, the 30-year fixed rate mortgage is a unique benefit for Americans. Many other countries use adjustable rate mortgages that respond more quickly to central bank decisions, for better or for worse.
It makes for a lower payment than you might otherwise find, and it makes for more certainty. Some would say that we end up paying more interest over time as a result, but others would say it's a luxury that helps us afford more home than we otherwise might want to buy. You don't ever want to assume that rates are going to do something in the future just because people are saying they will or because you feel like they will. Rates are where they are today, and there's really no guarantee that they'll be there tomorrow or that they won't be higher.
In an ideal environment, the Fed's not doing anything. But when the Fed is active, they absolutely do have an impact on what you're going to pay to buy a new home.
So that's the housing market, everyone. Things are not looking good. We all know part of the great reset agenda was to make houses so unaffordable so you own nothing and be happy. Could this all be part of their agenda? Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But let's go back to the markets now. Both a strategist sees shaky sentiment as a Fed pivot rattles bulls. So strategist says global equity breadth is looking dire and S&P 500 funds attract abnormal inflows ahead of rebalancing. So we'll go ahead and have a quick look at the pre-market right now. We can see they're all in the red. The Dow's down 240 points. Breaking news as well. Key inflation measure shows 2.4% rate in November, lower than expected. We'll have to wait more data there. The S&P 500 is down 0.9% and the Nasdaq's down 1.38%. And we'll have a quick look at gold and silver too. That's gold and silver according to these charts. Everyone has different charts, but gold is flat, silver's down 0.45%, but Bitcoin's down a fair bit, down 1.3%. So let's get into this report here. So the hawkish pivot by the Federal Reserve combined with uber bullish sentiment among stock investors has caused risk appetite to be suddenly twitchy. The S&P 500 is heading for its worst week in more than 3 months after the US Central Bank said inflation concerns are back in focus. Not only that, but we're seeing asset inflation and a lot of heat in the markets and a lot of bubbles in the market. You know, we're seeing things like the Hawk Tour coin, we're seeing fart coins, we're seeing 13-year-olds making meme coins that are worth millions of dollars overnight. These aren't signals that, you know, we're at peak in the market. Then I don't know what is. Like button, smash the video. Thanks for that, Robert. Signaling fewer interest rate cuts than anticipated next year before the next Fed meeting. Allocation to US equities had surged to a record, and cash holdings has fallen so low they triggered a sell signal for stocks, according to Beaufort's monthly fund managers survey published earlier this week. We saw the VIX spiked massively on the day of the Fed meeting and went up about 70%. In a note late Thursday, Harnett wrote that global equity breadth remains dire, meaning a relatively small cohort of best performing stocks must keep winning to mask any ongoing correction breadth on the surface. The best illustration by the S&P 500 equal weighted index, which has dropped more than 7% since a late November record, while the S&P 500 itself has fallen less than 3% in the same period. Now, I think it may be called the S&P 5 soon because it's really only 5 to 10 stocks that's holding up the markets right now. The Magnificent Seven, etc. So he said in an exchange-traded fund tracking US banking stocks, the SPDR bank ETF needs to hold near 2020 highs to prevent investor sentiment from souring ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration on January 20th. The strategist has previously said that investors should start putting more money into stocks outside the US, like China and Europe. I don't know about China, especially with them, becoming less and less friendly, and a lot of their companies going bust right now, especially their housing market, like their property developers. But the US, compared to the rest of the world, is very overvalued right now. So we can see this chart here. S&P 500 rally narrows again. Equally weighted benchmark sees more severe drop. So the strategist's warning comes near the end of a strong year for US equities. They are on track for record inflows in 2024, according to BofA, rallying 23% after a gain of similar size in 2023. So I think a big correction in 2025 will be overdue. So optimism driven by resilient American economy, artificial intelligence developments, and falling rates have lifted stocks. But the reason why they dropped was because the markets were hoping that they'll go back to zero, because the markets are addicted to 0% interest rates right now. But there are now doubts about whether the rally can run further after the Fed's hawkish tone earlier this week. So while bond funds saw their first outflow in 52 weeks, at $6 billion investors had been loading up on stocks in the week through Wednesday. Global equity funds drew the biggest inflow ever at $69 billion, with US stock funds also attracting a record $82 billion. Now, at the same time, a lot of CEOs are selling as well. There are normally large daily inflows across all S&P 500 funds this Wednesday, possibly related to upcoming December 23rd quarterly rebalance. So the rebalancing of benchmark index, including S&P 500, coincides with Friday's quarterly triple witching, which will see an expiry of $6.5 trillion worth of options tied to individual stocks, indexes, and exchange-traded funds, and share volumes typically spike during the option expiration, which has a reputation for causing sudden price moves as contracts disappear and traders roll over their existing positions. So at the moment, according to the pre-market, it's not looking very bullish. We can see again, markets are down, Bitcoin's down. Let's see if there's any breaking news stories here. And is there anything you guys want me to cover? Just drop it in the chat and I'll see if I can cover it. Obviously, quickly check this key inflation report as well while we're here. So a House Republican deal for 3-month federal funding plan endorsed by President-elect Donald Trump failed Thursday night. Amazon workers across 7 facilities in New York, Georgia, California went on strike. So I hope that doesn't affect your Christmas presents. Yeah, Dogecoin. I'll go ahead into coin market cap. We can look at the broader crypto market. So yeah, Dogecoin down 18%. That's why don't put all your money into meme coins. It's not a good financial move there. We can see Cardano down around 11% as well. So Nike on Thursday reported quarterly earnings that beat Wall Street expectations, while revenue and profit were down year over year. So still not great at Nike. Okay, so let's go into this PCE report. So prices barely moved in November, but still held higher than the Federal Reserve's target. And this is why the Fed's worried about inflation getting away from them. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, the Fed Preferred Inflation Gauge, showed an increase of 0.1% from October. The measure indicated a 2.4% inflation rate on an annual basis, still ahead of the Fed's 2% goal. And we all know that the real inflation numbers are much higher than this. But lower than the 2.5% estimate of the Dow Jones. So excluding food and energy, core PCE also increased 0.1% and was 2.8% higher from a year ago, with both readings being 0.1 percentage points below the forecast. And Fed officials generally consider the core reading to be a better gauge of long-run inflation trends, as it excludes the volatile gas and grocery prices. Well, they are volatile, but they are a lot higher than they were 5 years ago. So income and spending numbers in its release were also a bit light compared to expectations. So personal income rose 0.4% after having jumped 0.7% in October, falling short of the 0.4% estimate. So inflation's going up, but your wages aren't keeping up. And again, this is the official stats. Real inflation is higher than this. On spending, personal expenditures increased 0.4%, 1/10 of a percentage point below the forecast. Obviously, a lot of people are spending for the holidays right now, but I think in January we'll get some weaker numbers there. So this obviously comes after the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates, was worried about that inflation is not going down as quick as they thought. And it's kind of common sense thinking that when the path is uncertain, you go a little bit slower, he said. So that's the stories for the news today. What do you guys think about this? Let me know your thoughts below. Thanks for watching the live stream. You're awesome. I'll see you all in the next video.